All right, Charity, we're ready to begin.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the South Fulton Mental Health Collaborative Wellness Wednesday event for May. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so today we are going to be talking to you guys about supporting mental health in children and adolescents, and then also sharing out some resources for summertime and summer support programming. Excuse me one second, a little technical difficulties there, but I think I have us moving along. So with us today, we have members from Fulton County Schools Office of Student Support. I am Charity Trowbridge. I'm the coordinator of social work services. I also have with me today Nicole Webb, who is our director of student support, Shimona Harrell, who's our coordinator of secondary school counseling, and Scott Farr, who is our coordinator for elementary school counseling. We are here today to talk about child and adolescent mental health, and we are going to get started with Mr. Farr, who's going to be talking about the difference between behaviors and mental health concerns in children.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. And as Charity told you guys, I am Scott Farr, and I'm the coordinator of elementary school counseling. So what I wanted to get us started on this afternoon and on this Wellness Wednesday is we're talking about students, and we're talking about our littles. So when we're looking at our children and our elementary school students, we really want to keep in mind that children can also develop the same mental health conditions as adults. However, sometimes their symptoms may differ a little bit. Something else we want to keep in mind is mental illness in children can be hard for parents to identify. And we know this, and that's why we in the Office of Student Supports want to help you guys and be able to coordinate and collaborate with you guys to help give support and assistance. Many children who can benefit from treatment don't always get the help that they need. So we want to talk a little bit about that today as well. Another thing to keep in mind is it can be difficult to understand when we see certain behaviors and we see certain mental health problems, because it also can look like somewhat normal child development as well. And we want to keep in mind that children may not always be able to explain how they feel or why they behave in a certain way. So when we look at that, we want to think about mental illness as being that thing where a condition that might change the way a person thinks, feels, or behaves. And when we look at our young children and our predominantly like our elementary school students, we want to look for a few things that we can notice and pick up on when we see that. Some things that I want to point out to you guys before we move on to the next slide is looking at particular things like mood changes, unexplained weight loss in your child, maybe some physical harm or self-harming behavior that may be going on, and just typical behavior changes. When you look at what you would consider maybe normal child developmental behavior, and that changes rapidly or intensely, keeping that in mind as well. And then when they come to you, or they may talk about some of their feelings to you, and they're talking about intense feelings that may be hard for them to understand or explain, we want to keep that at the forefront of our mind too. And then physical symptoms such as weight loss, such as things that may be going on. They're not eating properly, or they're doing certain things that may be changing some things in their behavior and their development. So things that we want to pick up on before we move on to talking about more of the adolescence as we get a little bit older is thinking about when we're looking at children and we're talking about, what that developmental behavior is and what a mental health problem or illness could look like. Some things to keep in mind when you're looking at that is mental health could mean when you're talking to your child or you're talking to a student that they have a lot of things in their life that are important to them or that they value, that their future fills them with hope, that they want to talk about, when I grow old, when I get older, I want to do this or I want to do that. They have aspirations and they have dreams. They talk about liking themselves and who they are and who they surround themselves with. And they're overall just satisfied and happy with life. And they kind of know that there are people there that we consider like a trusted adult that care about them or concerned for them. When we look at that on the flip side and we talk about when a mental health problem or illness might arise in a student, we want to think about and pick up on things where it seems like that they kind of have that that regard of that nobody really cares about them or nobody likes them. They may say that in their words and verbally, or we may pick up on that on some of their demeanor and their behavior. They're often sad, irritable, worried, or angry. We see anxiety creeping in with them. They may talk about that they don't like who they are, who they think they feel like their self is. And then also being able to not have that true goal setting mentality, and they don't really have anything that they're looking forward to in the future. They may tell us that they're helpless, lost, or don't feel like they're in control of their life. So when we're looking at those things, we want to be able to put things in place to kind of help them as we're walking that road with them. And that's kind of some ways to pick up on early childhood when we're talking about early learners and our elementary age students.
So similar to what Scott had mentioned with our little kiddos, we see the same in our adolescents. All adolescents are going to have a range of emotions that they experience. It's very normal for kids to go through periods of anxiety, especially related to particular things that are stressful, that we know are stressful to our adolescents, school events, social events, doing new things of that nature. When they're experiencing a high level of anxiety in relation to that, that can be very typical. The same thing with periods of sadness. We know that a typical adolescent breakup is a very sad experience for our children to go through. And so we're going to see some pretty extreme emotions when they're going through some of these natural life events during adolescence. So having a range of emotions can be very typical. Emotional regulation. During adolescence, this is a time where children are learning to regulate their emotions. They're having those thoughts of, is what I'm feeling in relation to what has experienced, does this align? Does my emotion align to what just happened? Or is the emotion maybe too big and I need to bring myself back and do some reflective thinking? So they're learning that process of emotional regulation. So for them to have periods of dysregulation can be very much normal for our tweens and our teens. And that goes the same with the self-management. A lot of times we'll see they're learning to self-manage their emotions, that they're not always going to be perfect at that. So they're going to still have behavior outbursts, and whether that be something that comes out potentially in anger, or maybe that comes out in, a moment of just really crying and needing some alone time, they're still figuring out that self-management piece and what to do with their emotions. So all of these things can be very typical in adolescent development. Where we start to be concerned that maybe there's a mental health issue is we really look at the intensity, the frequency, and the duration. How intense are these things? And how often are they happening? And then how long are they lasting? So we know that if somebody is anxious because they're taking a big test, right, there might be anxiety leading up to that big test. And then after that test is over, poof, the anxiety is gone. It was related to a situation. It didn't have a significant impact on their functioning. It was something that they were managing in the moment. But we also know that we have kids that carry around a lot of anxiety, and it isn't necessarily related to a specific event coming up. And so they're carrying that anxiety daily. And so the intensity is pretty high from them. The frequency is often, and the duration sometimes can be constant. That's when we start to cross over into a student that might need some mental health support. Also looking at the impact on the functioning. Is their emotionality or their behaviors creating a significant impact on their functioning, to the point where it's impacting their grades at school, it's impacting social relationships, it's impacting family relationships. Maybe they're starting to show a lack of interest in things they were really interested in. These are all indicators that it might be something more than typical adolescent behaviors and emotionality. And then lastly, just looking at this acute or chronic, we know they're going to go through periods and they're going to experience things. A lot of teenagers like to hide and live in their rooms. That's their safe zone. It can be challenging to sometimes get them out of their rooms. but knowing when this is normal for them to want to be in their rooms and when they're truly being in their rooms and they're in a state of avoiding people, avoiding interactions, and unable to function and cope with what they're experiencing and get into their regular daily routine. So those are kind of how we would look at identifying something being just a typical behavior or something that we might want to look at getting some mental health support for.
Thank you, Charity. Now, this leads us to the discussion of suicide and signs of suicide. There is a direct correlation between students who suffer from suicidal ideations and students who have unmet needs in the area of their mental health challenges or unresolved issues with mental health challenges that they face. So it's very important that when you are in question of whether your student is dealing with a behavior problem versus a mental health problem, it's important that you seek professional help to assist your students with coping with their challenges, as well as identifying what the student's mental health challenge is. It's important to do this because students can then be led to have suicidal ideations. And you are not alone in this fight to decrease suicide attempts amongst our students and in your communities. So therefore, while you play a role, you are not alone. You have your schools, your social workers, your psychologists, your school counselors, as well as communities, which your schools have an on-site mental health provider assigned to their school that all work together to support you and your students, especially when there are signs that students struggle with suicide ideation. Now, within the district, we play a role in educating students on what to do when they are experiencing signs of suicide or they have friends that are experiencing signs of suicide. Within our district, students receive instruction on what signs of suicide are, and students are taught to act. A, acknowledge signs of depression or suicide in a friend. C, care, show their friend they care by following certain steps. And then T, tell a trusted adults. As you guys know, educating students on what suicidal signs are, telling them what they should do in response to a friend that may be showing signs of suicide, and then really putting it on them to reach out to a trusted adult. We've dealt with teens who try to assist their friends through this process without telling a trusted adult. However, students need to know that they are not trained to assist their friends, but instead they need to reach out to a trusted adult, such as a teacher, a counselor, a social worker, psychologist, school admin, or even a parent. So in showing that they care, students are encouraged to not brush off the signs that they are seeing, but to ask and show they care by just asking and engaging their friends in conversation, and then turning it over to a trusted adult, okay? Now, as it relates to the parent's role, okay, because your friends, your students may come home and actually share with you their concerns with a friend. It's important that you know what to do. And then it's also important that you know what signs to look for within your own child and what to do if you have to support your student through the process of notifying a school official about their friend, or if you have to support your student themselves who may be having suicidal thoughts. So it's important, one, that you look out for warning signs and seek help immediately. I always instruct parents to do not overlook changes in your child's behavior, okay? And to reach out for professional health. For example, if you have a student who has an ailment, a heart condition, you go to the heart doctor. And the same is true for mental health challenges. If you have a student who is suddenly has an onset of different triggers, it's important that you reach out to a professional that can assist you, okay? The second step, someone move the screen forward. If you could go back to. All right, the second step that you need to take in assisting your student with thoughts of self-harm or suicide is to help build coping skills and positive supports for your students. Making sure they're getting exercise, making sure they're staying engaged with their daily activities, offering them ways to express themselves through dialogue with family and friends or through journal writing, listening to music, and receiving help from a professional who can teach them other coping skills that they can employ when they are having thoughts. The next thing is for you to, one, listen to your child. Don't assume that they are just being dramatic, right? You have, as adults, we have gone through life and we have built up the coping skills and strategies to employ and just life experiences where things may not be stressful or overwhelming for us. However, these are kids and they haven't had the experiences that we have had, and they don't have the skills that we have as adults. Therefore, I always encourage parents to not brush off students' claim of self-harm or suicide. So trust what your student is saying and get them to a trusted adult, a mental health provider, so that the trained professionals can assess the state of your student. This is just a quick resource for parents, because it's important for you too to act if your child is showing any signs that are concerning to you. If there are changes in their mood, if they are sleeping more or less, if their agitation or anger is increased, if they're withdrawing, it's important that you acknowledge the signs and you seek assistance with how to move forward with your student. Show that you care. Engage that student in conversation, engage your child in conversation. Don't be afraid to ask direct questions, because we want to uncover where the student is so that we can get them the help that they need. And we don't want them to work with these thoughts and emotions and desires to self-harm, to carry those thoughts alone. We want to work them through it and to get them the assistance that they need. And then again, we are here with you. So reach out to your school, counselor, social worker, psychologist, and or therapist to see how you can move forward with assisting your student.
All right, so we talked a little bit about, I'm sorry, my camera's not coming on. Okay, there it is. All right, so we talked a little bit about what we can do at school, what we're doing to support kids at school. So now let's talk a little bit about what this looks like at home. First of all, the best way to support mental health and positive behavior for kids is to give them a solid foundation, right? We all know that even as adults, when we are low on sleep, when we haven't been eating well, when we're just kind of like off our game, we struggle more to make decisions and make positive choices. So what we really want to do is make sure that our kids are getting nutritious food, ensure adequate sleep. Sleep is huge for mental health. And I know it seems very small and maybe unrelated, but it's absolutely not. Also promoting exercise to get those feel good endorphins and everything going. Providing a healthy living environment. So making sure that like the house is clean and things are put together, organized as much as possible. A healthy living environment just around like social, our interactions with each other, and stuff like that. Ensuring regular visits to the pediatrician and talking to your pediatrician if you think anything might be wrong. So if your child is struggling with some emotionality or behaviors or something of that sort, talk to your pediatrician about it. Also providing social outlets and social opportunities so that our kids aren't isolated and they have that social outlet. Appropriate guidance and discipline are always huge for, for a healthy development. And then if you need to, seek professional support for yourself or your child. Raising kids is hard. Life is hard right now. A lot of people are just not okay, and it's okay to not be okay. But if you need a little extra help, go ahead and find those resources so that you can get what you need to be the best parent you can be for your child. Or if your child needs it, talk to the school, see what's available. There's tons of resources. And that's what we're here for. So just diving a little bit more into these. So providing a safe and supportive low stress home involves keeping adult talk and arguments away from kids. I know it's hard. It's definitely hard to stop yourself in the moment, have that self-control, and then have that argument when the kids aren't around or away. But it is really important to make sure that we're keeping a lot of the adult talk that can stress kids out that they may not understand, or any heated arguments away from kids. Healthy conflict is totally fine, but we want to be able to model that problem solving for our kids. Also setting reasonable expectations. Sometimes our expectations might be too high, and that can really stress our kids out, causing a ton of anxiety, feelings of inadequacy and everything like that. So we want to make sure that, our expectations are in line for what we would expect for any kid that age. And if you're not sure what to expect, you can ask people at your school, the staff at your school, you can ask your pediatrician, things like that. Always make sure to praise your child when they do things well and tell them you love them. I know we can get caught up in our own lives and our own things, and we sometimes fail to notice that they made their bed every day this week, and that's huge. I know they're supposed to, but they did it on their own. Like, let's congratulate them. Let's tell them we see them. We see what you're doing well. We see you showing up at school every day. We see you trying your best. So just always making sure that our kids know that we see them. Creating routines is super important, especially for the little ones. But then once we create routines for the little ones, they'll grow into big ones that have a great sense of self-regulation, a sense of security. They help to prevent power struggles, because if we're like, okay, time to get off technology and go to bed, our kids are like, yeah, we do this every single night. This isn't a surprise, right? So then there are no arguments that might lead to big emotional outbursts and things like that. So it helps to teach structure and establish good habits. And of course, these things work for most kids, but some of our kids who have more intense mental health needs are going to need more than this as well. So I'm not saying this is like a one fix wonder or anything like that, but these are just great strategies to support with your students' mental health at home. Also encourage communication, and this can be really hard because sometimes our kids say stuff and we're like, wait a second, what? So listening without judgment, and just listening to kind of understand, just be curious. And no matter what we think about their difficulties, they are very real to our kids. So even if we're like, that boyfriend, you're not going to think about it in 2 years, or who cares about that test or whatever, like what they're feeling is very, very real. So always making sure that we take them seriously and we listen to them, and we empathize as much as we possibly can. And then kids pick up on what we do. They always are watching. So we want to make sure that we're teaching, modeling, and also reflecting on appropriate coping and problem solving skills. So when we're in that situation, even kind of like talking our kids through things that we're thinking, that we're feeling like, oh man, I had a really hard day at work. I need to come home and use my coping skills, things like that. Or if you're having a conflict with somebody, kind of modeling those problem solving skills. And then when you're working through things with your kids, just talking to them about what could you have maybe done differently, what made you feel better the last time you felt this way, so that we can kind of coach them through those things as well.
Okay, so that moves us into summer programming and summer resources that we wanted to share out with everybody. So first, I'd like to share out our new Connect Fulton site. Connect Fulton is an online hub of just a tremendous amount of resources across Fulton County. So I encourage everybody to check that out if you're in need of resources, anything from mental health to economic aid, housing resources. There's a QR code here that you can scan. The website is also here as well. You put in your zip code and it will start to link you with services that are in your area. And then we've included some of our summer programming that are being offered by some mental health partners within the community. So I have included those on these slides. So feel free to go ahead and snap a picture, take a screenshot, or you can always visit our website, the Office of Student Support website at Fulton County Schools, and all of this information is on there as well. These summer programming include both parenting workshops and groups for the children, and they are online, so they're easily accessible. So I encourage everybody to check those out. Even if it's not that your child has a mental health need, some of these workshops and offerings are just going to help support having healthy mental health, helping children with developing coping skills, with managing stressors and things of that nature, which we all know are just great skills for our kiddos to have. So again, feel free to take a picture or you can visit our website that has all of this information on it as well. This is just some summer resources we wanted to make sure that you guys had available. I want to point out two of these. So we have our Text for Help line. That is a line that is staffed by a counselor 24 hours a day. It's safe, it's free, it's confidential. I encourage you to have your kids put it in your phone. We talk about it all the time at school. Kids, put this number in your phone. And it just gives them somebody that they're able to reach out to if they're feeling like they're in need of a little bit of more support. We know our kids really do well with engaging through text messaging. And so we really tried to align this need so that they felt like they had somebody to go to if they needed to. And then also I wanted to point out the Georgia Crisis and Access line for anybody that is in need of support for a mental health crisis. If you're somebody in your family, your child, if you have concerns about somebody having suicidal thoughts, this is a great resource to work with to ensure that we can get that person the help that they need and keep them safe. So I wanted to point out those two. And that actually wraps our presentation up for today. So if anybody has any questions, we'll give it a few minutes and see if any questions come up through the chat. We thank you guys for joining us today and being a part of this. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to our office. You can reach out to your school counselor, your school social worker, your school psych. We are here as a team to support you and your children. So thank you.